in our 1320 Kings Insider with us here. James, weigh in on everything you just heard us talking about.
Your thoughts on
your thoughts on Rolling Stone's top 100 albums of all time.
Well, certainly, I don't think I ever want to hear "Go Turtle, Go Turtle, Go" again.
Oh man, hey,
that happened like right next to our set at halftime while we were trying to do halftime.
Gonna happen this season.
I'll tell you this. I'm not gonna act holier than now. I was bumping my fists when a little 8-year-old kid was like, "Ninja Turtle, go Ninja, go Ninja." I go holier than now.
Yeah,
but I was also.
James was doing it live on set. That's his point. Like,
I was also 8 years old. I didn't do that.
We were looking over like he's like 14 feet away. Like, how in the world are we supposed to hear the questions for halftime? Like, what? Whose idea was this? Yeah, that was a really strange night. Yeah, clearly this isn't my genre of music. But I love the Beastie Boys.
And then there's nothing wrong with that. There's the Beastie Boys they're a part of the story of hip hop. I couldn't let this go, even though I said I was. I couldn't. I found the College Dropout.
Yeah, Mark Wall found it. Yeah, too.
It's 52nd. There's a case the College Dropout is a top 5 hip hop album.
Look, you went even further than I would. I don't have no problem with it. I said you can make the argument that's a top 10 album of all time. You would, and especially the example they use and the reason they use for Life After Death. College Dropout took rap from one genre to a whole nother that we're still in today.
Yeah, it created something called backpack rap. It was the birth of that. Like, if you birth the sound, the G-Funk sound, you can't be anything but a top 10 album of all time.
Come on, man. The Chronic, Doggy Style, Life After Death, College Dropout. These are benchmarks for eras. For every 20 years, it feels like these guys are coming in here.
At least we got Lil' Kim Hardcore's album on here.
I'm not going to mention hardcore no more because that's my girl Kim.
That was not a good album though. Let's just call it. Like, the Crush on You remix wasn't even on that. Like, it's not a good album. Like, James, I'm sorry. I'm gonna leave it. I'm gonna leave it. I promise everybody. It's over. Let's get back to arguing over the trade value of Zach LaVine. When we were arguing over something else. We were talking earlier about, there seems to be, of course, we tied the Kings into this because that's what we do, but there seems to be a regular conversation about Zach LaVine not being back in Chicago for whatever reason. And we've kicked around a variety of ideas, like Chicago might not be interested in the 5-year, $212 million that they can offer him. And if someone's willing to offer him their version of the max, the 4-year 164, whether it be Detroit or San Antonio or whoever, he may be more inclined to take that. And then, of course, the question inevitably comes up. If you're Sacramento and you have the ability to acquire Zach LaVine, it would be through a sign-in trade, and it would almost certainly be to the tune of 5 years, $212 million. Is that appealing?
That's a lot of money. I mean, that's a lot of money for a guy who's had complete knee a complete ACL tear.
Yeah.
And I like LaVine. The Kings signed LaVine to an offer sheet years ago. I mean, they thought he had him. But even at that time, afterwards, he's been pretty clear that he was very happy that the Bulls matched. Like, he did not really – he was signing that because that was the most money he got in free agency. So – I don't know. I like LaVine. I think he would probably be a lot of fun. It'd be a really bad defensive backcourt with him and De'Aaron Fox, and it would cost you a ton. I mean, it's not just a $212 million. It's the first round pick you're going to have to give up to get the sign and trade done. Although I'm not trading the number 4 pick. Again, it's
neither Kenny.
I'm just saying. I'll reverse that a little bit because I don't know if you heard, but I proposed a trade to Chicago, and I was like, They all thought I was talking about including a number 4 pick. I was like, no, we're not including number 4 pick. Like, he's going to leave regardless. Like, no. I will say this. If they made a move with the 4 to get Zach LaVine, I wouldn't think it was the death of the franchise. I wouldn't want to do it. I try and do everything that I could not to make that happen. But if it came down to it, because the way I looked at it, James, is, and I know there's concerns, but this is a guy that we always talk about you'd never be able to sign as a free agent here in Sacramento. An all-star wing, 3-level scorer. And essentially, it's a trade because you have to give some stuff up. But essentially, you're signing this free agent that you say you would never be able to sign. You got an opportunity to get him. I'd probably hop on that. Even if it included the number 4, I'd do it begrudgingly.
Yeah, I mean, I would try to retain the number 4. I mean, if you're going to give up a future first, you could try something like a dual sign and trade where you gave up DiVincenzo, if that's the place that he wanted to go. You give up Rashawn Holmes, which they've liked Holmes, and he, of course, is a Chicago native. I think there could be something, because if you are going to lose him for nothing, you might as well try to get, something out of it. I even think like there's even a way that you could probably do something like Holmes and Harrison Barnes in a trade there that would actually make them better, like short term. Although there's a lot of talk about them potentially dealing Vucevic for Gobert. Like they're in the hunt for Gobert. There's a lot of movement that's going to happen this offseason, I believe. Just because there aren't any teams with cap space, that doesn't mean that we're not going to see teams like really shuffling their rosters, especially if you're like the Bulls and you got to a certain point where, you took a huge leap forward. DeMar DeRozan is on a clock now. You can't just lose a player like Zach LaVine for nothing. So you are going to get involved if he is going to leave. You're going to try to get him money. But again, I don't think he's a max money player. I don't think he's a $212 million guy. So that's a lot of money.
It is.
Especially for a guy who blew out a knee a few years ago and relies on athleticism almost 100% of the time.
Let's figure out how to word this question. And this all kind of tied into a list that The Athletic put out of top 25 free agents. And we can go over some of the different names we're talking about. We were talking about Zach LaVine. That's kind of how that got started. But obviously, Donte DiVincenzo is on this list here. And leaving out, they use this formula to get to a particular, a potential value. Their value for Donte is 15.5, which I think we all thought was a little bit high. It's 5.5 above the mid-level. But I think the more pressing question is, and I'm sure in our extensive coverage of this, we've covered it, but since it fits what we were talking about today, does Jaden Ivey mean Dante's not back?
I don't think so. I mean, it's complicated. I think in a perfect world, you would want to have someone like DiVincenzo there, at least in year 1, year 2, because Jaden Ivey is going to take a little while to develop. And I really do like the Davion Mitchell, Donte DiVincenzo backcourt as like a secondary backcourt. And you can pay a reserve guard $10 million a year if he's good and he checks a lot of boxes. And DiVincenzo can shoot the 3. He can be a distributor. He is a good steal guy. He is a very good defensive player. And he's a great rebounder for his position. He does check a lot of boxes. So I would be okay like keeping DiVincenzo and drafting Ivy, but that means you got to clear out a bunch of other guys. So like Terrence Davis, Justin Holiday. I don't expect Justin Holiday like really to be a big part of what they're doing anyways, because he's almost 33. But an expiring contract that you can go do other things with. I don't know if you walked into next season and your 4-guard set was Davion and De'Aaron and Donte and Jaden Ivey, who doesn't seem to fit the D's there. But if you were to have that as your group, I think you're pretty good. You have defense, you have athleticism, you have elite speed. You can do just about everything with that group. Are they good enough shooting? Probably not.
Except for shoot. You can't shoot.
You better have a shooting a three that can really shoot, and you're going to have to distribute minutes to the three from that group, anyways. But you'd have to have an elite shooting
Terrence could
like
do
small
that,
forward. What's
right?
that?
Terrence could do that.
Well, he's got Terrence gone in that situation.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh,
No, I mean, it's possible Terrence could be back in that situation and you run 3 guard sets all the time. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. And we talked about that before. If you make the right addition at the 4, and you now have Sabonis as your 5, you look a lot different than last year's, attempt at running 3 guard sets. It's just totally different when you have a passing big. That guy can act as an orchestrator. And we see teams like Denver use 3 guard sets quite often, or even like if it's not a 3 guard set, it's still small ball. They go real small because they have Jokic who can sort of orchestrate everything on the offensive end and even on the defensive end to a certain degree. So, yeah, I think it's interesting. The Kings, they need to add somebody at that power forward spot that makes just like a tremendous amount of sense, whether it's getting a guy like Chet or Paolo or Jabari in the draft, or it's going out and trading for a guy like John Collins. Whatever it is, they need to fill that 4 position. That's probably their biggest position of need, and then everything else falls in after that.
I was when we mentioned the 3 guard set, and I talked about Harrison possibly, playing time at the 4. James, do you feel the same way that I do, where 3 guard set this year feels so much different than 3 guard set last year? When you talked about Fox, Halliburton, and Buddy Hield, it seemed so soft on the perimeter, where you didn't have the toughness to be able to run a 3 guard set. And obviously you talked about Sabonis as well being there. But now if you run a 3 guard set, you're talking about, and I'm not even including Jaden Ivey, but you're talking about DiVincenzo, Davion, and Fox with Sabonis. It just takes on a different feel. It feels like that you can get away with that. You have the physical components on the perimeter to be able to play a 3 guard set this time around if you try that.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's about having different looks. That's what you have to. You can't have 3 of the same guy out there. And I really, like I love Tyrese Halliburton as a player, but on the defensive end, the backcourt pairing with him and Fox defensively may have never worked even remotely close. I mean, like to NBA standards at all. They just weren't great defensively together, and neither projects as like a plus defender. Fox has a higher ceiling as a defender, but Halliburton is a really good steal man and a really smart guy. But how many blow-bys did we see last year? And the same thing with Buddy Hield. I mean, how many times Buddy Hield during his career in Sacramento just completely get blown by? So maybe you're right there. I also, again, I've mentioned this before, but when you have a center that's averaging 12.5 rebounds a game, you can put a lot of different 4s next to him. He covers a lot of deficiencies, especially on the rebounding side. And you add in a guy like Donte DiVincenzo, who's just such an incredible rebounder for his position. And you can disguise a lot of things. You can go with a true, 3-point shooting 4 that maybe isn't a really good rebounder, a 5 or 6 rebound per game guy. You can get away with that if you have DiVincenzo and you have Sabonis playing major minutes together.
Is Keegan? We know that Keegan Murray is the most easily drafted, insert into play. In his case, probably insert to start, no problem. Is he immediately adapt on defense? Can he fit with what obviously this team needs? Drastic improvement on the defensive end, and it's probably a lot to ask a rookie to come in and help do that. Though we did say Davion was changing an entire culture last year, so I guess that's not a possibility for us. But Keegan Murray on defense, is he ready right out the gate?
It's funny. I just watched every block he had all in his college career. To be honest, watching him in live game versus watching him in clips, he's more active on the defensive side of the ball than I thought he was. He's just such an interesting prospect. Again, I think he's going to be a good pro. And I just think that number 4 is too high. Now, they could draft him at number 4 and just go whatever. They don't care what I say. Like, why should I matter? They've got professional scouts that are doing this. But there are certain things to him that translate and things that don't. Like, he's a really good natural shot blocker. Like, I watched all of his blocks. He averaged like 1.9 blocks per game, but he's not going to be a 1.9 block per game guy at the pro level. If he averages 0.8 to 1.1, then I think you did really well there, because a lot of his blocks are super help. They're super collapse defense helps. Some of his blocks are, standing in the paint and like fighting with taller guys and going up and getting their hand on balls. I also think he is fluid. He can go with guards to the basket and get up and block shots that way. But a lot of the things that he did at the college level, the help defense, that just doesn't happen at the pro level. Like, you want to be a help defender all the time, well, then you're a guy sitting in the corner, and 3-point shooters at the pro level shoot 40% from the corner 3, and your team's down by a ton because you're not staying on your guard, on your guy. So a certain amount of his blocks won't translate. They translate a lot better than what we saw from Paolo Banchero. Like, Paolo Banchero will be lucky to average like 0.4 blocks, 0.3 blocks per game as a pro. I think Keegan Murray can at least be an engaged defender that way. He is switchable. He's still, like, watching his body movement. His body movement reminds me so much of Marvin Williams. Just like everything he does reminds me of Marvin Williams. And that's not a horrible thing. I mean, that guy was a number 2 pick in the draft. He, played in the league for like 14 or 15 years. That's not a total knock. It's just that I think he translates to just a really, really solid role player. And that's typically not what you draft at number 4. And like, his usage was like, he had a higher usage than De'Aaron Fox. And he averaged 23.7 points a game or something like that at the college level. He's not getting that opportunity. He's going to be a 3-and-D. He'll get some post-ups, but his post-ups, when he's in the post, he reminds me a lot of Tobias Harris. And he does remind me a lot of Tobias Harris overall. But when he's in the post on the offensive end, he doesn't have the same force or the same pop that you get from Tobias. And that's not fair either, because Tobias has been in the league for 10 years. So, he's developed, but still there's just not that same quickness or physicality that you saw from Tobias, even as a young player.
Yeah, Tobias is a little more dynamic athletically than Keegan. And as we stick with the themes of lookalikes for Keegan, he kind of reminds me of, and his game doesn't really play the same way. He just kind of looks like that out on the court. Remember Brandon Wright out of UNC, left-handed guy? Like, he's long, kind of lanky. He doesn't move particularly fast, but he kind of knows how to play the game and his angles and what works for him. I think Keegan's a much better player on the perimeter than Brandon was, but that's kind of who he reminds me of. One of the things about him on the defensive end that I liked, and myself and Damien, we talked about earlier in the show, and it was probably just wordplay and, nitpicking a little bit. But I think he understands how to play team defense. That's kind of what I saw from him with some of the film with Iowa. Do you think that understanding of team defense, even though it is on the college level, do you think that IQ would translate over to the NBA?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, again, if you're drafting Keegan Murray, it's not just because you think he's the most NBA ready. You think he's going to be a really good basketball player, right? So, like, when I look at, like, your guy, Shaden Sharp, right? You just have no idea what he's going to be on the defensive end. And he's so far behind a player like Keegan Murray as far as defensive acumen. So he doesn't understand the coverages. He doesn't understand the why. So I remember Willie Cauley-Stein telling us years ago, like, in his second year, he's like, we're like, what's different? He goes, well, last year they would point to and tell me, you need to run over there. So I would go run over there. He's like, so I'm running over there and over here. And I'm like, whatever the play set is, I start to learn where I'm supposed to run in that play set. He's like, year 2, I know where I'm supposed to go. But now all of a sudden, I know the reason why I'm going over there.
Right.
He's like, I didn't know that in year 1. And
Yeah.
part of that's because Willie Cauley-Stein, didn't want to do the work, didn't as far as film study. So that's a big reason why he didn't understand the why. Again, like that, he was a 3-year college player. The fact that he didn't understand some of those things, that's on him. But that's still, if you're looking at a guy like Keegan Murray, he already understands why he's doing a lot of what he's doing, right? Where you're going to get a guy like Shaden Sharp who, no. A guy like Jaden Ivey, no. Like, he'll be okay defensively because he'll be able to recover athletically. But both of those guys they've got good length, they've got great athleticism. They'll be able to recover somewhat. But a guy like Keegan Murray just knows where to be. And a lot. I think his ceiling is probably, probably Harrison Barnes. That's probably Keegan Murray's ceiling. But yeah, it's not a bad ceiling at all. And I don't think his floor is super low either. So, if you're looking at a player that's somewhere between Marvin Williams and Harrison Barnes, that's a really good player.
Right.
But at number 4, you're drafting for what could be greatness. That's what you're hoping for.
Right.
And it's not that those guys, they're both really good players. Marvin Williams, Harrison Barnes, they're just not great.
Right.
Do you think, like, with the hiring of Mike Brown and the talk about how bad this defense has been for so long, and this probably only pertains to De'Aaron Fox, might pertain maybe Harrison Barnes also. Are they a little bit more keyed in, like when training camp starts and Mike Brown's talking defense, or this coaching staff is talking defense? Do you think they're a little bit more keyed in because of Mike Brown and his pedigree in the league as it pertains to defense versus, like Luke would talk about, we're focusing on defense. We're starting practices with defense. I feel like De'Aaron would point that out a time or two, but yet game after game after game, Luke would often regularly say they're not doing what we're asking them to do defensively. Do you think they'll be a little bit more locked into the message now simply because of Mike Brown's pedigree in the league?
I think so. That and the fact that he's so meticulous. That's what he's OCD big time. I mean, his playbooks are color coded and 6 inches thick playbooks. Like, it's extensive, and you're going to be studying. I think one of the things too, I'll point out, and I keep making this point, but I'll keep doing it. It's not that Fox has played for, this will be his 4th head coach. It's that he's playing for like his 7th defensive coordinator, or 6th defensive coordinator. I mean, people forget like what Bob Byer, they just kept bringing in new guys. Rex Kalamian, and that's just in the Luke Walton era. Mike Longobardi. There's 3 in the Luke Walton era that lasted less than 3 years. Like, his assistants, lasted longer than he did. His last defensive assistant, but then you go back and they didn't have a true I guess Elston Turner was on the staff, and that's your defensive assistant.
No.
See what happens when you talk defense? Like, everything shuts down. That's what happens. You talk defense, everything free. This is exactly what happened to Luke Walton. Luke Walton would try to be talking defense, and then they would freeze, just like James Ham did right there. See, that was the perfect time for you to freeze right there, right in the middle of a soliloquy about defense.
Yeah, because they do the same thing. They totally.
Ham just reenacted the Kings on the defensive end for the last 16 years.
Yeah, just watching.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, that was really nice. Can you do that again next time?
Yeah.
Sure. I can go right past you and dunk again. That's fine. Yeah. So, I mean, I think you guys got my point. The point is that Mike Brown brings a defensive-minded mentality where all of the other coaches they had defensive coordinators, but their mentality was not defense. Their mentality was offense first. And I think we're going to have a change, a cultural change. Just that shift in itself will be something, because you can be great on offense and have the best defense in the league, because Mike Brown just proved that. He's proving it right now in the NBA Finals. You can have it both ways. And so hopefully the Kings take that to heart. The players take it to heart. But again, one of the downfalls to switching out coaches and defensive coaches and all these people all the time is you got to teach them your system again. You got to teach them your terminology again. So I want all of those guys having flashcards right now. And, they should have a coach who's not just like building a flashcard deck for each player, but also it should say what it was in the previous defense that they're being asked to do. Because a lot of it is just a change in terminology.
Teaching them isn't concerning. Unteaching them is what I worry about. Where you have to like unlearn the stuff that you did in years prior.
Right.
And in that case, you have to explain to them why it was wrong. And then here's what we're doing. And perhaps at least this would be the case for me as a learner. Here's what we're doing, and here's why we're doing it. Here's why this way is better.
There's only a couple of them left. So, the roster turnover, I mean, yes, you're going to have to reteach Fox certain things. But, again, like the Kings right now, they have Doug Christie going around and working with players right now on some of their deficiencies. I mean, he spent a couple of weeks with Davion Mitchell. He spent some time with Sabonis last week. By their Instagram, it looks like he's hanging out with, one of the other assistants, along with De'Aaron Fox, Davion Mitchell, Domantas Sabonis, Chimezie Metu, Damian Jones. All these guys are hanging out together right now at a gym in Napa.
Damian Jones.
Well, this is great. This is what you want. This is how you build chemistry within a group. But there's also players that aren't there. And so you're always going to have that, okay, well, it would be nice if Harrison Barnes is there. But, Harrison Barnes might not be there this summer. We don't know what this team is going to look like, and I think it's going to look dramatically different than it does right now. And so you got to be ready for everything. But again, no Donte DiVincenzo in those hangout sessions, and I don't know why. I don't know if he declined or, again, he's in a contract year, and there isn't a lot of communication going on right now between those two sides still. So,
Donte DiVincenzo hates the Kings on the next edition of the Kings.
I don't think he hates the Kings, but they certainly, him and his group they weren't happy at the end of the season. Okay. And I don't think that's changed dramatically.
I'm glad you said that. So let's talk about Donte DiVincenzo in that situation with the Sacramento Kings front office, and we'll do that when we return here with our 1320 Kings insider, James Hammond, creator of the Kings Beat here on Sacramento's #1 sports station, ESPN 1320. Clear. I need 1 second, guys. Sorry.
Muffin, middle of the day. Shout out to my man Rob W, by the way. Rob W too, but Rob Carter as well, man. I'm just giving you a hard time, man. I enjoy all the banter, man. We discuss things, we talk, we have a good time, man. So yeah, Rob a cool dude, man. I appreciate him tapping in. Like I said, I got to give him a hard time. I enjoy the banter with everybody except for Jacob. I'm just joking, Jacob. I have no problem with your banter either. It's all good, man. It's all good. All of it. As long as people aren't disrespectful, we can talk and disagree about anything. That's all
It's funny. I don't block people very often on social media. I probably have blocked maybe I blocked 50 people over the course of like 12 years, 13 years, but I blocked someone yesterday who like replied to somebody that they don't trust. I was mentioned in the first tweet and I was tagged in the first tweet, and then they replied to that and says, I don't trust James Ham, anything that James Ham says, blah, 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 making up rumors of whatever. And I'm like, dude, why do you follow me then? You know what? Like, and how do you not understand that I'm going to see what you're tweeting at somebody? So you know what? Like, if that's the way you feel, that's fine. I just don't need to see that. I don't need to hear that. So you can kick rocks, because I've done this for a long time, and my reputation is solid. It should be solid with most people. I don't make stuff up at all. So yeah, so I dropped the ban hammer on somebody yesterday, and I'm just like, whatever, man.
Ain't nothing wrong with the block. That's what it's there for.
Yeah.
Kenny, Bobby Gerald blocked him.
Yeah, well, shout out to Bobby. He's probably watching right now and still has done nothing about it.
That's funny.
Jacob, I wasn't talking about you, Jacob. I was talking about the other Jacob. No, it's all good. Still all good, even with the other Jacob.
Bryant brings up the mute button. No, because I social media is free for me to do all the work that I do on social media and cover a team. I don't need to mute you so I don't have to hear you. I can just take away your source of information, which is me. So
I always think about it like this. If I got a problem with somebody or I don't like what they're saying, I never want to give them the satisfaction to know that they bother me enough where I blocked them. So I'll never block anybody. I blocked one guy, and that's almost to protect myself because I was probably going to curse him out. And I was like, I like my job. I like what I'm doing. So let me just, help myself out here. But other than that, I can't. There's people who always say stuff crazy about me and, do all this other stuff. I can't give you the satisfaction of letting you know that you bothered me by blocking you. So I just leave it there.
We have a second. I like Chris Butcher and Gary Harris. I kind of want to call him Chris Boucher, like Bobby Boucher. Maybe it is.
I like Gary Harris too. He just always hurt.
Yeah, he does have a track record, but he's solid defensively. He can hit the 3-ball, decent 3-level scorer.
Do you know what's special? I don't know if special is the right word, but what reminds me about Gary Harris is he was one of the 3 guards of who you would take. It was Gary Harris. I think the other guy's name was Young, something Young from Kentucky, left-hander.
Joe Young.
And Nick Stauskas. It was like, which 3 guards are you going to take here? And the Kings have first pick. They end up taking Nick.
Elfrid Payton. That was the other one.
Oh, I never bought the Elfrid Payton night. Never did.
Yeah, well, the Kings needed a point guard at that point, if I'm not mistaken.
I just don't like guards that can't shoot.
We're coming back, guys. 3, 2, and live on the Odyssey app, live on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live as well. It's Stilo and KC, brought to you by McQueen and the Violet Fog, the smoothest gin in the world, handcrafted in Brazil. James Ham, our 1320 Kings insider, with us here, talking everything pertaining to your Sacramento Kings. We kind of tongue-in-cheek mentioned Donte DiVencenzo a few moments ago. We're talking about some of the guys who are gathered together working out right now, and Donte DiVencenzo not being with them. Of course, Donte is a restricted free agent. He's a guy Kenny and I were talking about earlier in the show. We've questioned where he fits depending on who the Sacramento Kings draft, where he fits, like what's the dollar? Does the dollar factor in? All of these different things. But there is kind of that underlying thing that you talked a lot about as the season came to a conclusion, that there is something involving Donte DiVincenzo's people in the front office that they're not really vibing over, particularly the way that he was used and how that may have affected his value here this offseason. But and this might not be something that you can clarify, but I do want to ask the question. Is that more about Donte DiVincenzo's people? Is that more about his agent and his agency than it is Donte? Or is Donte all in on this? Like, yo, what the F were these guys doing with me? Like, they had me playing behind a variety of different players that he probably was more equipped to start over. But how much of that is Donte versus the people representing Donte?
Yeah, from what I know, it's both. It's both. Yeah, it's
that concerns me a lot.
Well, I mean, he had a good point. Like, why not give him a shot to look and see what he would look like next to De'Aaron Fox? And I think the point too that that they thought that they intentionally kept him out of the starting lineup to like reduce his value on the open market. Like, I can't argue with it. Like, I've tried to have conversations about it and
Mhm.
with the franchise, and yeah, it doesn't always go that well.
Yeah.
So, like, they both took a stance and they stuck with a stance, and at the end of the day, it caused a schism between everybody. So, like, they've got to figure out a way to get back together and get on the same page, or maybe they don't. You
Mhm.
know, if you end up drafting somebody and you need that money to go to a different position, then maybe that's what you do.
Hmm.
Even if you end up drafting Jaden Ivey, and then you resign Donte DiVincenzo, you're basically saying like, look, man, we think of you as our backup shooting guard / small forward for the next, you're our backup 1, 2, 3 next to Davion for the next 4 years. That's what you're kind of looking at. And so anyway,
Feel
yeah,
the need to
it's
point out, while I like Donte DiVincenzo, there's nothing in his career that proves he's not that.
not that what.
That he's not a backup guard.
Yeah, I mean, he did start 60 something games
Sure.
for the championship
Yeah,
Bucks.
no, 100%. He sure did, on a team with Giannis Antetokounmpo on it and
Well,
Chris Middleton, and
and
on a loaded roster that won an NBA championship. So
4 All-Stars.
if you can have a deficiency at a position, it's okay to have a deficiency at one starting position. He wasn't the caliber of those other players.
No,
Is
and
the point.
like in his defense, I get what you're saying, but I also think that his ability to do so many things is what earned him that job. His ability to defend, to play make, to get rebounds, to get steals, to hit an occasional three. It was, you could have put a 3-point specialist there at that position, but that team needed somebody who is more of a jack of all trades, master of none type player, which is kind of who Donte DiVincenzo is.
Right.
When they almost traded for Donte DiVincenzo the year before, I thought it was a brilliant move. I mean, he is like Bogdanovich. He is like uh, Tyrese Halliburton to a certain extent. He's just not the pure passer that Halliburton is, but sort of that really toolsy player that's more toolsy than he is a pure shooter or a pure distributor or, like all of the other things that you could throw in there. But again, you're not going to find a better rebounding shooting guard. Or, I guess you can find better all around guards or guards that are better at specific things than he is. But when you look at the whole package that he brings, he does bring a lot to the table.
I completely agree with that, but I think the idea of a jack of all trades, master of none works really well when you have a master of multiple trades all over the floor. It plays a little bit different when you need a guy who can shoot at a high level or create it, or maybe in Dante's case, you look at the case for keeping Donte DiVincenzo is that he defends at a high level, and if that's the argument, then I'm perfectly okay with it. But I feel like sometimes and maybe I'm taking this whole Donte DiVincenzo thing the wrong way, and the clash between his people in the front office. I agree. The way that Donte was, I mean, we were screaming about it on the air every day. Like, why are we still seeing this? Why isn't Donte playing?
Mhm.
At the same time, I'll be very curious to see what his offers are, because I absolutely believe, I don't think this is going to be a Rashawn Holmes situation. Donte DiVincenzo is going to get offers. I believe that that's plural. He's going to get offers when he becomes a free agent. I wonder what the highest offer sheet that he signs will wind up being.
I think the problem that DiVincenzo has is what all 25 of those top 25 free agents that you talked about have, is that there is no money this offseason. I think there's only 5 teams with actual cap space. So that limits teams to doing mid-level, right? So the mid-level is basically a 4-year 44. And that's good money. And so his people think that that's like the baseline of what he'll get is a mid-level, but there might be teams out there that would be willing to go upwards, that might be able to put more money into it. Now, a year ago, when they traded for him the first time, I thought he was more like 14, 15 a year. That's where I would have put his value. But Again, the ankle injury was pretty catastrophic. It took him a long time to heal up and get back. He's a player who works hard. He's super intense. It's going to be interesting. But I could also, again, like I could make the same argument that where, the Bucks needed a toolsy player at the 2, the Kings need a pure shooter at the 2, and I could easily make an argument that Malik Monk or Gary Harris or name that shooting guard that is more of a 3-and-D specialist, more of a catch and shoot guy, would make more sense than him at this point, because that's how your roster construction is. So again, I like DiVincenzo. I think the Kings should be active, and if they can do a sign and trade with him, I think that's great, because there isn't a lot of money out there. So if there is a team that has a lot of interest in him, the Kings can work something out with somebody and maybe get back something to make it work.
In the thought process of him staying here and making it work, obviously the damage is done. When I say that, I mean he played where he played, how much he played, and whether he started or didn't start. That's already done. His market has been set. Is it a situation where, in your opinion, if he has to come back to the Kings, he's looking at it just like that? Well, I have to come back. Like, they're paying me, at the end of the day, the money's the money. I have to come back. Or can it be salvaged to the point where they talk to each other and they say, hey, I know how you feel about last season and your time here, but we really want you to be here. We really want you to be a part of this and think that you can help, and he can come back in a better mood? Or are we not even close to that situation?
No, I think that they can still work things through. Yeah, I do. I mean, when you go out and trade for a player twice, I mean, you are showing interest. You are showing that they fit what you're trying to build. And, he's still young. He's still a young player that can fully grow into a role. Everyone talks about like a Villanova player. They're just really, really well coached from a young age, and they get it. And that's what I would say with DiVincenzo. DiVincenzo fully gets it. He does. He's a guy who, while he might not, get it to, where he's not starting and causes, some hullabaloo behind the scenes, maybe that's not getting it fully, but as a player on the court, he understands that he probably shouldn't be shooting 14 times a night. He understands that, his strengths are to hustle, to be that physical perimeter defender and to go get rebounds and do all that stuff, and to make your teammates better. That's something that he does do. So yeah, I think that there's a way to figure this thing out. Just like, the Niners are clearly figuring things out with Debo. He's back in camp. He hasn't got his contract yet. He will get his contract most likely. But, I don't think that there was so much of a bridge to cross. But there is some repairs to do for sure. I don't have the list in front of me of who his agent has this summer as far as free agents and as far as draft picks. But I'm going to guarantee that there aren't a bunch of them like rolling through Sacramento right now. Like, these are situations that you have to figure out, get on the same page, and move forward with.
Have any thoughts on Bruce Brown? It's a name that came up earlier in our conversations. We really didn't have a chance to dive super deep into, but he's on the market this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, the Kings need a 6'6" to 6'9" small forward that can hit the 3 ball and plays defense. So if it's Bruce Brown, if it's one of the Martin twins, like we've talked about those guys. Martin twins are at 6'5", but they play bigger. For some reason, they play much, much bigger than 6'5". I mean, you can even put them at the power forward spot for times. Yeah, I think that they're going to kick the tires. If you're the Kings, you have to moneyball this thing a little bit. You got to find another star, but then you need to start finding players that really do make a lot of sense for you long term. Is Mo Harkless going to be back in Sacramento? I don't know, but you need a player like Mo Harkless that hits the 3 ball. Those are players that you need. And I don't think, we talk about like Malik Monk. Is Malik Monk going to get like more than $5 million a year, like the biannual? I don't think so. He'll probably have to sign a 2-year 10. Is Brown gonna? I mean, if Brown got a 2-year 10, that'd probably be really really good for him. And I don't mean 10 mil a year. I mean 5 mil a year. You know, what Rashawn Holmes signed for the first time. I think that's where you're going to try to add a player like that at that range of player that can stick around. You know, the Derek Jones Jr. Guys, that type of player that maybe fits your system better than they will somewhere else.
Just a quick note, Casey. Follow up on him. I pulled up Donte DiVincenzo's agent's client list. Yeah, we're okay in that regard. We're not missing out on anything, and I think they're upset because Donte DiVincenzo is very literally their cash cow.
Oh, okay. Well,
so he's the dude who's going to make money for the entire agency. So I just throwing that out there.
Understandable.
Got to be thorough. Got to do the research, and yeah, we're okay.
I
feel front office member that turned heel on Dante's agents knew that.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I feel like they do. Oh, what are you going to do? Withhold Jared Culver from us? Give us a break.
I like Jared Culver too.
So do I,
but James, I know you probably answered this before. You'll probably answer it again, but no trades or anything like that. What kind of money are the Kings working with this offseason? Like in a pure situation where they re-signed DiVincenzo, and now we're looking at Bruce Brown, the Martin twin. Like, what kind of money are they working with after that?
Okay, so the way it works is that you eat your cap space up first, and then you get to the salary cap, which is I think 121 million this year, right around there, 120, something like that. I don't have the number in front of me right now. But as of right now, the Kings are relatively close to it. They can clear up some cap space by eliminating players, so they don't have to pick up the $6.3, $6.4 million qualifying offer for Donte DiVincenzo. But the way you'd work with Donte is that once you throw out the qualifying offer, that's a cap hold that you can't use that money if you're under the cap. Right. So you'll wait and see what happens to him, and you won't be able to sign a bunch of extra like free agency deals. But what you can do is you can move off of players. Like, you don't have to pick up the qualifying offer on Trey Lyles. The problem is that Trey Lyles is like super cheap. It's like $2.7 million, right? Yeah. But when you look at your salary cap, it's based off of 13 players. So if you only have 6 players under contract, then you need to put a placeholder at the league minimum, which is 950, probably closer to $1 million this year. So just think of it as like $1 million for every player that you don't have up to 13 players. So if you only have 7 players, you got $6 million in cap holds that eat up your salary cap space. So it's a little complicated, and you're already, because the Kings are the 4th pick in the draft, there's a monster cap hold that goes with that pick as well. So they're going to walk into free agency with what amounts to zero. They won't be like way over the cap, but they'll probably be like, if you broke down all the salaries, you probably be at like 112 million. But when you throw in all the cap holds, you're going to be well over the 120 mark. And then I think the luxury tax isn't until like 142 million or 144 million this year. So the Kings weren't a luxury tax team, but they did spend, I think it was $131 million on salary, which is a couple of million below the luxury tax last year. And then next season, they only have, I think it's 60 million in dedicated salary.
$64 million.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. So no, it is really, really wild. And someone like Will asked in the chat, did the Kings have an MLE to use? Yes, the Kings have an MLE to use. And the other crafty thing is that You can let some other teams sign Donte DiVencenzo to an MLE, and then you can match that, but that's not your MLE. That was their MLE. That's not
Oh,
yours.
Wow.
Yeah, so you have him under a salary cap hold at 6.4 or whatever it is, right? Well, that salary cap hold is what you have. It's going to move around and do its thing. It's just going to sit there. And then when another team signs him, if you match, you're just matching a contract. You're not matching an actual MLE. So you still have your MLE to use.
So it doesn't matter what the cost of Donte is in that regard. Like the MLE, I think we determined like 10 and a half, somewhere roughly around that to 10.3.
Yeah.
If someone offers him 12 and some change, like that, what you just said still holds true.
Of course. The Kings have, because he's been in, he just finished his 4th season, right? Because he's been in the league longer than 3 years, because when you traded for him, he was on a rookie scale deal, and you basically, when you acquired him, you acquired the final 3 months of his contract or 4 months of his contract, but you also acquired the history of his contract. So his contract is 4 years long, which means you have full Larry Bird rights to him. So you can match any offer for Donte DiVencenzo that's out there.
So I mean, this isn't breaking news, but essentially, the Kings are just going to wait for somebody to offer a match if they want to keep him. Like they would not offer him something first.
Well, yeah, and it actually plays into their favor, because if I'm not mistaken, the MLE is like, let's say 10.5 million. Well, if you sign a free agent deal with a different team, you can only have 5% raises per year. If you sign a deal with your own team, you can have 8% raises. And so he'll lose the 3% per year, which is compounded. So it's not that much money, but it's a couple of $100,000 for each year of the deal. It might work out to be $1 million more in Sacramento than it would be somewhere else. And of course, that can be made up if you, like, say, sign a deal in Texas where you don't have state income tax, where in California that guy's going to pay like 9% or 10% of his salary straight to California, and then on top of that, all of the money he gives to federal. So yeah, you can save money or make money back. But yeah, the salary cap is really intricate, and I love working with it and studying it. But there's all kinds of ways to take advantage of it, and that's what we've seen the Kings do in the past. You wait as long as you can to sign deals like that, like your MLEs and stuff. You fill up all your salary cap space before that. If you can clear $4 or $5 million extra in salary cap space, and even if you use that to retain Donte DiVencenzo, if you do that deal after, if you sign or match the Donte DiVencenzo deal after you sign the other guys, then you can use cap space. So let's say they're at 120 million is a cap, and the Kings get down to 110 million by trading players or not picking up contracts on guys, and then you have this cap hold of 6.3 million. Well, now you got 3.7 million you can go sign a player with, and then you wait until you get up to the cap, and then you go and you trade. Then you go and you match the deal, and then you sign your mid-level exemption for someone else. It's about how you, in what order you sign the deals, if that makes sense.
Yeah, LeBron signing 15 days after free agency regularly is part of that. Like understanding the ways that both the ways that general managers and even players can manipulate the salary cap and salary cap rules is key to a good front office.
Yeah,
to know all the different loopholes.
They're projecting the Warriors will pay between luxury tax and salary upwards, if they retain everyone, upwards of $450 million.
Wow.
Like, maybe not next season, but the season after, something like that.
Jeez.
And so you got a team like how do you compete? And how you compete is you draft well, you sign your own players to long-term deals, you keep them, you build something that's sustainable and people want to stay.
And that's why I don't knock what they're doing. That's what they've done. They've drafted well, and they've made that, like most teams have to make a decision. We can't keep all of these guys. The Warriors are like, we keeping all of them.
Right.
We sign in everybody. And if it costs us $400 million, it costs us $400 million.
Well, that and real quick on that point too, I'll just tell you the Warriors always keep their late first round pick and their second round picks. That's where you get Jordan Poole. That's where you get Kevon Looney. It's where you get all of these extra guys that they have that you're like, oh man, I'd really like to have that guy. They kept their pick as opposed to a lot of teams that are number 28, 29, 30 in the draft who always sell off their picks. Well, Warriors use them and they use them wisely.
James Ham, the Kings beat our 13-20 Kings inside.